Welcome to a brief video describing the results of FPath Experiment 003. FPath is my project name for experiments on the Feynman Path to nanotechnology. And what is the Feynman Path to nanotechnology, you may wonder? Well, it is the idea that you have large machines make smaller machines, which in turn make smaller machines, and so on, until you reach the point where you can reliably move atoms about at the nanometer scale. Of course, this experiment is nowhere near that yet. It is still operating on the scale of centimeters. But hey, you have to start somewhere. This experiment demonstrates the controlled motion of a movable red square onto the position of a green static target square. This seems pretty simple really, and after all, every printer and plotter can readily do this sort of thing. However, the difference here is that the software is closed loop. It is not sending the red square to a predetermined point. The software optically detects the green square and does whatever is necessary to move the red square until its coordinates are identical. This is kind of like experiment 001, but the movement is now two-dimensional. Also, instead of using stepper motors, it uses small DC gear motors for the X and Y axis control. Moving little colored squares about is the obvious bit and is rather trivial, to be honest. The real purpose of this experiment is to further develop the Walnut control software and create a library of code which uses pulse width modulation ports on the Beagle Bone Black. Another goal is to improve the hardware platform on which these experiments take place. This is all necessary because these components will probably be needed in order to move further on down the Feynman path. So let's have a look at the experimental setup. You'll note that I am now using Lego bricks in the experimental apparatus. These things are great! Lego bricks may be a child's toy, but in reality they are precision engineered and built to extremely close tolerances. They come in many sizes and can be moved about in endless configurations and are quite inexpensive. They are easily strong enough for my purposes. Furthermore, they can readily be milled and glued to create pretty much any custom part. We start with the red square visible just off the x-axis. Actually, the square is just a 1x1 red Lego plate stuck on top of a strip of transparent plastic. This strip of transparent plastic is in turn glued to the bottom of a 4x1 Lego tile. That tile is mounted to the bottom of an x-axis carriage attached to a screw thread. The whole axis is driven by a DC motor, the speed of which is controlled by pulse width modulation. The motor is geared down to about 200 RPM. The entire x-axis is mounted on an identical DC motor running vertically, and this forms the y-axis. Using these two axes, the red square can pretty much be moved anywhere on the experimental bed. For those interested, I'll show a clip of the motor design at the end of this video. The bed of the experiment is observed via Logitech C920 webcam running off a Windows 10 PC. You can see here that the image recognition system consuming the video feed has detected the red square because it has drawn a helpful little black cross on it. The software, called Walnut, has the ability to inject images into the video stream. If we make a virtual green square appear, the image recognition system will immediately detect that as well. The recognized coordinates of the red and green squares are transmitted via TCP/IP to a Linux-based Beagle Bone Black microcontroller running software called the Walnut client. Both of these software components are written in C#, by the way. Yes, C# runs very well on Linux. The Walnut client interacts with the pulse width modulation ports on the Beagle Bone Black, and these in turn send a series of pulses to a set of low voltage Pololu DRV8874 DC motor drivers, which then move the motors. The software is closed loop and constantly reacts to drive the red square onto the green square's position. It does not care what the actual coordinates are. It just continuously reacts to make them identical. Walnut software contains chunks of code I call behavior modules, which control the movement and speed of the axes. It is in these modules that things like more sophisticated path planning and PID-style control will eventually be implemented. At the moment, though, the modules just move each axis to the proper coordinate as fast as possible, only slowing down at the very end. It all works very well, but there's one caveat. Once the red square moves under the green square, remember the green square is injected virtually, it does not really exist, the image recognition algorithm loses the red square and everything stops. Turning off the green square makes the red square resume its movement towards the last recorded green square position. If we activate a green square in a different location, we can see the red square immediately tracks to the new position of the green square. We turn off the green square as it moves along to let the red square move into position. We can see the movement behaviors have really done their job if we briefly turn the green square back on. This seems trivial, but it will eventually develop into the ability of the software to control larger machines, which build smaller machines. So, the experiment can be called a success. Besides reaching the rather simple objective of moving a red square onto a green square, the real goal of incrementally improving the Walnut control software build platform has been achieved. Also implemented is quite fine autonomous control of DC motors via pulse width modulation. As promised, here is a view of one of the LEGO DC gear motors. As you can see, it is pretty simple and inexpensive to make. I have built a generous selection of these sort of motors, each with a different RPM ratio. You can also see there are LEGO plates mounted around the perimeter of the experimental bed. These can be readily used to mount motors and other apparatus. The whole bed can simply be lifted out and a new one inserted if a different setup is required. The bed is really just a small MDF board painted white. Here is an example of one of the DC gear motors which has been built out with additional LEGO bricks, so it can be mounted where it is needed. All of the dimensions used in the experiment are designed to work off multiples of one LEGO unit. This keeps things nice and consistent, and, of course, the LEGO bricks are extremely precise in this regard. When the experiment is complete, this assembly is simple. Just remove the LEGO blocks and put them back into storage. Only the LEGO assembly you saw earlier is glued. The rest of the blocks are simply pressed into place in the normal LEGO way. Well, that's the results for FPath Experiment 003. So, what is next? Ideally, the Walnut software should be updated so the image recognition for the red square happens before the virtual green square is injected into the video feed. This would enable the red square to move right on top of the green square location, even if the green square is still visible. This isn't too hard to do, just a matter of coding it up really, and I don't think it's really worth documenting with a video though. However, enough messing about with hardware and software infrastructure. I am feeling the need to start going small. Well, smaller than I am now at least. After all, that is the point of it all. The next video might be something along those lines, or at least steps in that direction. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.